Hi, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Calvin, We the Species. It's March 10th, chronologically, and I'm with Laura H. KAHN. Actually, I'm going to just throw out the title of this interview because by the way, I've been wanting to do this since Laura and I met on the OneHealth steering committee maybe a year ago. It's been a long time, Laura. And you've been in my consciousness to do this. So as events and things happen, that's how we got together to finally do this interview. But it's with Laura H. KAHN, MD, MPH MPP. She can tell you what all that is. We're going to talk about OneHealth Initiative. She's an author. She's an author of nonfiction, but she wrote her first work of fiction, which is called Thorns-When Earth Refugees Are Aliens. And that's what it looks like. And it's available on Amazon. We're going to talk about this a whole bunch. And continuing with the title, Antimicrobial Resistance, which fascinates me. We'll talk about that. Health leadership. And her journeys at UCLA and Columbia and Princeton and Mount Sinai School of Medicine. There's a tremendous amount to unpack, but I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled when I got involved with the Women's Health Institute, Dr. Gloria Bachman, and I got even more thrilled, if that could be, when I was asked to participate on the steering committee for OneHealth, of which Laura H. KAHN has been instrumental in developing the whole theory of OneHealth, which we're going to talk about. So this is a really special, and I can't thank you enough, Laura.
Well, thank you for having me, Calvin. I really appreciate it.
Really, and I will say that I read this the other night, and it was a one-night reading, and I was glued, and we're going to talk about that. I was really glued, and I don't take notes. I don't take notes when I read books, but I took notes there because it was very mind expansive. And that's all I'm going to say. Anyway, I'm done with this. It's not quite the Johnny Carson monologue I always wanted it to be. There's no humor here. This isn't fun stuff, but maybe whatever. But anyway, I'm done. How about a little background, Laura? A little background in your journey?
Sure. Well, I'm a native Californian. Grew up in Southern California, went to the UCLA School of Nursing, worked as a nurse for a couple of years, decided to go pre-med and did a post-baccalaureate program. So I spent a couple of years taking all the pre-med courses that I avoided as an undergraduate. And then got into medical school at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine, and that's what brought me to the East Coast. And I've stayed on the East Coast since then. So I've been on the East Coast longer than I've been on the West Coast. And then from Mount Sinai, I went to Columbia, did a master's in public health and a general medicine fellowship. Worked for a number of years, and then went and got a master's in public policy at Princeton University. And that was the year of 2001, when I was about to start the Master's in Public Policy program, September 2001. If you recall what happened then, the terrorist attacks of 9/11, followed 1 month later by the anthrax letter attacks. And those events changed the trajectory of my career. I decided to go into biodefense policy work. And I joined the program on science and global security at the then Woodrow Wilson School, now the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs, and worked there for almost 20 years, and I taught at Princeton. So that's basically been my career in a nutshell.
Wow, that's one amazing nutshell. I was trying to digest, your background, and it is a wow. And Princeton, 20 years in Princeton. I love Princeton. It's one of the most unique towns in the world. The air is filled with molecules of learning. It's a fun
place to be. Yeah,
a wonderful place. I worked in Princeton in my pharmacy days for 2 years. It was quite an experience. But anyway, So, you've done, I'm on the OneHealth steering committee, and I'm venture to say that 99.9% of folks out there, anywhere, have no clue or understanding about what OneHealth is. You were a pioneer in this initiative. So how about talking a little bit about OneHealth?
Sure. So, well, my definition of it, if you will, is very simply that human, animal, plant, environmental, and ecosystem health are linked. And that might seem obvious, but that's generally not what we do in our approach to health, wellness, and disease. There's different camps of OneHealth. It's a broad umbrella. I come to it from the infectious disease perspective. And so when I started my career at Princeton, I was doing research on agents of bioterrorism, the microbes that are used as bioterrorist agents. And in my reading of the literature, particularly the veterinary medical literature, there was an overlap between agents of bioterrorism and the emerging diseases that are emerging into human populations, in the fact that they are, for the most part, zoonotic, meaning that they are diseases of animals that infect people. So there's the vast majority of agents of bioterrorism, the vast majority of emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic, and yet physicians and veterinarians don't talk to each other. Departments of health and agriculture don't talk to each other. Nobody was talking to the environment. I mean, we've created all of these little silos over the decades. And that wasn't always the case. I mean, before the 20th century, physicians and veterinarians often trained together. And certainly the microbes don't recognize a distinction between us and other animals, but we have created this arbitrary distinction between ourselves and other animals. And that has hindered our ability to address these diseases. So I came to it from that. And I think it's important also to point out that while the term OneHealth is relatively new, the concept is ancient, going back to Hippocrates, who recognized that if you went to low-lying swampy areas, you would get sick. And it would take 2,000 years until it was discovered that mosquitoes can transmit disease, and malaria literally means bad air. I mean, they knew that going there would make you sick. They had no clue what caused it. It was just miasmas, bad air. So there's the whole infectious disease part of OneHealth, and then there's the non-infectious disease part of OneHealth, the comparative medicine, the study and the recognition that disease processes across species are the same. So dogs get cancer, cats get asthma. A lot of animals get, heart disease. They have psychiatric illness. We think all of these diseases are unique to us, but they're not. They are, widespread across the animal kingdom. We have much to learn, and indeed, some of the greatest breakthroughs in medicine and public health were made at the human-animal interface. So there's that group. I came to it through the infectious disease side of the equation, if you will.
Okay. And so it's animal, plant health, and parenthetically even insect.
Oh, absolutely.
And bird. I've been reading through the vehicles of OneHealth. I've been reading articles that have been disseminated, about birds and diseases now crossing that barrier, so that diseases which were unique to birds may now become mammalian.
Well, avian influenza, for example. Yeah. Well, influenza, avian influenza, it's fortunately, it hasn't taken off human to human transmission because it's got a very high mortality rate. But pandemic influenza in general is a zoonotic disease. The wild waterfowl are typically the reservoir host for the virus. The virus is an RNA, segmented RNA virus, notoriously sloppy in its replication, so it mutates rapidly.
Wow.
So it's, you know, a perennial problem for us, certainly, and for many other animals.
Scary stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to interject something, but I won't. But it's about like just hopping on a vehicle and getting out of here. But we'll, you like the way I worded that? Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like that. Could you you wrote a book, One Health and the Politics of Antimicrobial Resistance,
Right.
which, by the way, scares the hell out of me. I do have a pharmacy background, and I read all kinds of stuff, and there's more and more and more drug resistance, and
Right.
and I'm not sure. Again, I'm very uneducated about that. How much progress is being made? You know, I talk about MRSA and all this stuff, but if you can make some comments about that.
Sure. Well, there was a veterinarian, Ron Warner, at Texas Tech University, who was communicating with my colleagues and I, and he was commenting about how there's this blame game going on. The physicians blame the veterinarians for antimicrobial resistance, and the veterinarians are blaming the physicians for antimicrobial resistance. And the bottom line is that nobody's at fault. We're all at fault. And in the course of the research that I did for the book, it was unexpected how large the environmental component is on all of this. That was very surprising to me, in that antimicrobial resistance is an ancient phenomenon. And, you know, for a long time, scientists believed that microbes, and our antibiotics come from the soil. It was believed that soil microbes would use antibiotics as a form of chemical warfare against each other, but in actuality, they use it as a form of communication. And they naturally have resistance genes to protect themselves against, you know, excess antimicrobial use. And so here we come along and we stumble upon these chemicals, and we start using them in very large amounts in both human medicine and in agriculture. And what the microbes are doing is they are very nicely sharing with each other resistance genes to protect themselves from the onslaught that we are doing to the environment, essentially changing the biome, if you will, of the planet in ways that we don't really understand, with our massive use of antimicrobials and our massive production of fecal wastes, both human and animal, 4 trillion kilograms at least per year. And that's just having a huge impact on the planet's biome. And so as a result, the prevalence of the resistance genes are increasing, making the microbes more resistant. And I think of it kind of like climate change. It's, you know, antibiotics have been very effective in treating infections, but they come with a very high cost, as with, you know, our greenhouse gas production. Our excess reliance on antimicrobials is not sustainable. And the microbes are developing resistance a lot faster than we can develop new drugs. So to look at it from a One Health perspective, then, we need to work with nature, not against it. And right now we're working against nature in our excessive reliance of antibiotics for everything, because, you know, as I said, the bacteria are going to win in this battle. They've been developed, you know, they've been harboring antimicrobial resistance is ancient. These genes are ancient. They go back to the prehistoric era. So what's the natural foe of bacteria are these tiny viruses called bacteriophages. And in fact, the bacterial immune system, the CRISPR-Cas9 system, is designed to fight against bacteriophages. Phages are the most ubiquitous, most prevalent bioform on the planet. We are surrounded by phages. Our body is covered with phages. Why don't we recruit phages to work for us? And there was interest in phages in the beginning of the 20th century until antibiotics came on the scene. They're much harder to use. They're very specific, which has its pluses and minuses. They don't cause really any adverse reactions the way many antibiotics do. And, I could go into a great tangent with that, but we don't really have the time. But all I will say is that we really need to start looking more at bacteriophages as an alternative and or an adjunct to antimicrobial therapy as a more sustainable way to treat bacterial infections.
Wow. My goodness. Well, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. Just listening to you, these things which love to eat these bad microbes. Wow. And we don't have time.
Yeah, we don't have time, but there's a great book that I highly recommend called The Perfect Predator by Stephanie Strathdee. And she had a great TED talk called How Sewage Saved My Husband's Life. I highly recommend watching it. It is a mind-blowing story that she had in saving her husband from a pan-resistant Acinetobacter baumannii infection using a cocktail of bacteriophages. And that was a game changer in this country. Wow. So I highly encourage you to watch the TED video, and it's on YouTube, How Sewage Saved My Husband's Life. It is amazing.
I'm taking notes.
That's all I will say on this.
Wow. I'm just taking notes.
Mm-hmm.
When I hang around you, I'm taking notes, which is good. This is great. I'm gonna actually watch it. I'm really gonna watch it.
Yeah.
You wrote another Who's in Charge? You wrote some brilliant, I mean, like, wow. And this was so prophetic. Who's in charge? Leadership during epidemics, bioterror attacks, and other public health crises. What really blew my mind is you wrote this in 2009, before COVID. Just a couple of comments about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, when the anthrax letter attacks happened, the problems in leadership were quite apparent in watching the government struggle with responding to the crisis. And I became interested, having studied the Masters in Public Policy, leadership is very much emphasized at Princeton. And so I became interested in the subject of leadership as it pertained to responding to public health crises. So the book actually stemmed from a student paper I wrote in one of the courses that I took. And so it just kind of extended beyond that. I turned it into a journal article, and from the journal article, I turned it into a book. But I must say that during the COVID-19 pandemic, looking at the leadership, the political leadership, I mean, there was a whole list of things that you should not do. But usually one assumes that the political leader has the country's best interests at heart. And that wasn't necessarily the case with the previous, administration. And they were making mistakes that I would not have even, thought to look up, but criticizing basic public health measures to save lives, to criticize it, to discourage people from using it. It was really quite striking. So, I mean, I'm about to embark, I'm planning to embark on another book looking at specifically the pandemic response to COVID-19, but it will be a huge undertaking.
Yeah. I'd sign up to get that one too. That's no, really.
that one I'm just starting. I'm still on the preliminary stage.
I mean, we could jump into that, but we won't. But I want to jump into why we're really here. Thorns-When Earth Refugees or the aliens. Like I said, I went to Amazon. I got my Kindle version of it, and I banged it out in one night, and I took notes, and I was completely enthralled.
Thank you.
Honestly, I'm not saying it because you're sitting across from me here. I'm saying it because I was completely enthralled, and I'm not a prolific reader. because I'm not, but I just didn't put this down. And then my emotions at certain parts kind of ran wild. And so you evoked emotions and made me really think. And you also in this, for me, my experience, taking notes and thinking, and then early on training me, which is what you did, Laura, to look at every word, because they're there and the messages are prolific. So it's a great read, and it's for everybody, although we'll talk about highlighting a younger audience, but nevertheless. So how and why why, where, when did you write your first fiction?
Well, I mean, I'm passionate about the One Health concept and trying to get it out there. And it's very clear that people are hardwired for stories and not statistics. And I enjoy creative writing. It's a kind of a therapeutic outlet for me, if you will. I mean, the subjects I deal with are not fun. But writing this story, I was literally able to live on another planet, and so for me, it was a very therapeutic exercise, and it took me over 10 years to write. This was not an easy book to write. Many iterations. I had a previous completely different iteration of this, and the original story was the main protagonist was the alien, was the creature, not the human. And I got lots of feedback from family and friends and colleagues, and they said, well, you really need to have a human as the main protagonist. so it's got the two parallel stories, but for me, the main story is actually the alien story. And I was just going to have humans appear, but it actually, I think, made it a better story to have the two contrasting points of view.
Which is great, and I jumped into both characters, in particular the alien, for a lot of reasons, which I'm not going to reveal.
Right.
But that alien I was particularly attracted and almost identified with. If that makes sense, but it's geared. I think it's for everyone to read, but there's a particular affinity for a younger audience.
Right, and that was by design. It's kind of a love letter to the next generations, if you will,
Okay.
about these important issues, particularly the relationships between kids and their parents. Look, I mean, now I have a perspective of being the parent, but for most of my life, it was the perspective of being the kid. And if you're a kid and your parent ignores you, you internalize that and you think, well, what's wrong with me? But as an adult, you have to look at it from both perspectives. The parent's dealing with their own issues, and they might not realize that their behavior or their lack of engagement with their kid is having a profound impact on their kid. I mean, you just don't think of it because we're all living in our own heads and we're all focused on our own needs, wants, and desires. So you've got, the parent-child relationship that I only as an adult became aware of this and wanted to write about it because I'm hearing about so many kids who are really struggling today. And for many of them, they have a rot relationship with their parent or whoever is raising them. So I wanted to give them the perspective that I gained as an adult to make them realize that it's not necessarily about you. Your parent might be really dealing with some difficult things, and you're a good person. You're a valuable person. And the way you're being treated has nothing to do with you, but everything to do with that other person. So I wanted to kind of convey that message through this story, and I wanted the protagonist to be a teenager, to provide that perspective.
And that is one, for me, is one of the key elements, because it's funny, I interviewed a young woman a couple of months ago, and her specialty is teaching parents to be parents, which we don't find a lot.
Yeah.
We don't find a lot, and I could talk for hours about that subject, and that's why I wrote my second novel, in part dealing with parents. So we don't spend enough time in our society with that. So this is another element that makes Thorns-When Earth Refugees Are the Aliens. I need to repeat that. When Earth Refugees Are the Aliens. I'm saying it twice, folks out there, get the message. That one powerful message here is parenting, which is an element of this. Before we continue with Thorns, I just want to go off topic for one quick second. I forewarned you I was going to do this.
Unfortunately, I think you froze.
Yeah. Okay, you're unfrozen. Okay. Okay, we're both unfrozen.
Yeah.
Okay. So I did forewarn you, but I like this question because it's, and you don't have to answer it, but whatever. Here goes. Excluding family and friends, somebody living or dead you'd like to spend a day with. And if there's a few, that's fine too. There's no rules here.
Eleanor Roosevelt.
What a great. It's funny you said that, because it's funny you said that, Laura, because she has been a hero of mine for a long time. And during the pandemic, I'm not an expert on Eleanor, but I know enough. During the pandemic, I got a hold of Ken Burns' The Intimate History of the Roosevelts. And it's a long, Theodore, Franklin, Eleanor. And out of the three, I fixated on Eleanor because she was just one amazing human being.
I agree. Yeah, I had the privilege of visiting her home last summer, and I was just struck by how human it is. Her own space, and I completely identified with her.
Yeah.
Much so.
And I don't think enough has been said and done.
Yeah.
To convey what she was with the work she did with the UN and the charter, with all that. The only thing I think in life she couldn't do was wash lettuce. How's that? Is that funny? There was an example, she spent her last 10 years or so in a really interesting, she lived with her doctor and her doctor Gurevich and the doctor's wife Edna, and the three of them shared a brownstone. And one time, just once, Edna invited her into the kitchen to help wash lettuce and make a salad. And when Edna reappeared, there was about 6 inches of water in the kitchen, and that was the end of Eleanor's washing lettuce. But she's just off the chart. But anyway, it's so funny that you said that, because she's been such a favorite person for me for a long time. So back to Thorns. There's a wonderful concentration of dialogue here, again by design. You wanted and by the way, I've said this to you before we went on air, I'll say it again. And I ain't no expert, but there's a wonderful screenplay here. Really is, and it's already done. The screenplay is basically done because this is such powerful dialogue that grabs you and holds you. You talked briefly about space travel, not briefly. I'm talking briefly about space travel, which you deal with, which once again is in the news, every day. the whole
Right.
concept of space travel.
Well, I think we're focused on leaving Earth. We feel we've trashed it, so it's time to leave. But, we really need to fix up our home. I mean, it's a lot easier to clean up our home and to restore it than to try and find another one, especially one that we evolved with, that we are native to. It's much preferable to trying to find another planet that most likely is not going to have the Goldilocks features of Earth. So.
Agreed. Really agreed. We can talk about
Yeah.
that at great length, but I love how you treat that in this. And by the way, when I mentioned this to you, I think last week, in reading this, I kept writing, because I'm an old movie person, and I kept writing movies which there was a movie here, a movie there, and it kind of lit my fire, because it made me think. And I even brought up movies, even The Wizard of Oz somehow got into from reading Thorns, got into my
Right.
consciousness.
Right.
And Forbidden Planet, one of the great science fiction movies of all time. We could talk about that. As we kind of wind down here, some concepts that you deal with in the book that are important concepts. If you want to DEI, if you want to make a few comments about diversity,
Right.
equity, inclusion.
Right. So, I mean, obviously it's important to treat everybody with dignity and respect and kindness. And I don't think what people realize is that it's a survival strategy too. A more diverse population has a greater chance for species survival than a uniform, homogeneous population. So not only is it the right thing to do, but it is the prudent, shrewd survival thing to do if we want our species to survive, is to have a diverse population.
It's
So that's
interesting.
one of the messages in the.
It's a powerful message. By the way, it's a powerful message, and how you treated it is a treat for people to expand their mind. I want so much to tell folks out there. I don't want to give nothing away.
Don't give it away.
I'm not giving nothing away, but I got to tell you,
Yeah.
there was one particular scene I got so angry. I mean, I really got angry to the point where I almost gritted my teeth, angry.
Right.
And I shook my head, and that was one of the things that evoked from reading this. And again, so I'm planting seeds that folks should. I mean, I got really ticked off. No comment. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, my daughter didn't like that scene either.
Oh, okay. So I'm not alone. That's a tough
You're
scene.
not alone, no.
That's a tough scene.
Yeah.
And I just want to keep talking about it, but I won't let people read it for themselves and get ticked off. You just mentioned respecting and valuing Earth, which we don't do enough of. The title of this conversation with Calvin, "We the Species," is, and I've been saying this for a long time. And it's like I want to recreate a scene from a movie, because I'm a movie person. I mentioned this to you last week. When Cher slaps Nicolas Cage in the face and tells him to snap out of it in the movie Moonstruck, we all collectively need one big slap in the face until we finally recognize we really are one species, which is DEI and everything. And the sooner we do that, the better we'll be. And
absolutely.
And
we've got to respect our home and treat it a lot better than we have been.
Yeah.
We only appreciate something when it's gone. We can't afford to do that in this case.
We can't, because we're running out of time. We're really running out of time. I don't think we get it yet. And we could have armies of Greta Thunbergs around yelling and screaming, but we just don't get it. Anyway, your thoughts about climate change? How, I mean, it's.
Yeah, well, what people don't realize with climate change is it's a lot more than simply the rise of the oceans. It's also the climate that allows agriculture and food security to exist. Now, for the past 10,000 years, we've lived in the Holocene era. And during this Holocene era, we've been on a climactic baseline. It's called the Holocene baseline. There have been a few deviations from that below the baseline called the mini ice age, the little mini ice age. And during that period, when the planet cooled by about a degree, there was widespread crop failure, famine, and wars because agriculture collapsed and food security disappeared. So whenever we deviate off the Holocene baseline, bad things happen. So now we've deviated about a little more than 1 degree above the Holocene baseline. That's what climate change means, change from the Holocene baseline that has allowed agriculture and food security, hence civilization, to exist. Because after all, the foundation of civilization is agriculture. And agriculture relies on a relatively mild, stable, predictable climate. Farmers need to know when to plant the seeds, be able to rely on rains and know when to harvest. If you don't have that, as it's going to be a real global crisis. And in fact, there's a book called Global Crisis about the mini ice age. So climate change is going to have, and is already starting to have, profound impact on our ability to grow crops, to raise our food, to feed ourselves. And that is the existential threat facing humanity, is the impact of climate change, its impact on agriculture and food security. And we can't feed ourselves, then civilization collapses.
How lovely to hear. I mean, I know it. I read about it. Jumping back, I always wanted to. I've read some stuff about, again, climate change and the fact that up in the Arctic, the permafrost is melting.
Yeah.
And that's been going on for millions of years. It's been, so we don't know. I mean, this is a little off topic, Laura, but we don't know what's underneath there, what's going to come up.
Well, hopefully not a ton of methane. There's a lot of methane under the permafrost, and that's bad news, because
so
methane is a very potent greenhouse gas.
And
very
there's nothing that's going to stop that. So this is a great place to kind of wrap.
On that cheery note.
Yeah, on that cheery note. Well, it's Friday, it's the weekend.
Right.
It's the weekend, maybe it'll snow. My one last chance on Tuesday, Monday. But this is available on Amazon. I got it on Kindle. We could, by the way, come back. We can come back and talk, and we talked about coming back in different shapes and forms and different ways to get messages out there, because that's what this is all about, getting messages out there. Absolutely. Your message is unbelievable, and I cannot thank you enough for your graciousness and your time and your passion, your background, and for giving me this for one night to expand my mind.